Have you heard of Hex earning trustless yield? Or maybe you've heard of Hedron, where you can take Hex and actually put it into a smart contract to sell it. Well, there's a new token that's coming out called the Genesis or Genius token that actually allows you to combine some of these functions into one token that is also trustless, allows you to earn a yield, and if you need to get out of that token, if you need to get out of this Genius token, you can sell it like you would in Hedron. So I wanted to cover this white paper where they go into excruciating detail, which is awesome because most white papers are utter trash, and this was very well put together. So with that being said, if this is your first time here, what's good? My name is Sam. For those of you who are returning, it is good to freaking see you. Now, if you'd like to support the channel, some links down below, or you can check out shop.letstalkpeds. There's a link down there in the description, shop.letstalkpeds.com. So, to give an idea of the Genius token, I think it's going to be like $Jenny. I want to give a broad overview of it, and then we're going to dive into some of the semantics. And I'm sure that I'll miss something here because there's this white paper is 27 pages and took a while to get through. So I'm going to try to cover it in a lot of detail here. And if I miss something, please let me know down below in the comments here. Very interesting, though. Okay, so broadly speaking, it's like 2.0 Hex, right? Hex 2.0, where they've made some of the changes to try to obviously make it better according to their point of view. Now, how does that work? Well, effectively, there's a giant supply of this token, and the portion of the supply that is staked earns the inflation of the system. So the maximum supply in this token is can be up to 275 billion tokens. So about a third of a trillion tokens, a boatload of tokens. But unlike, say, something like this, they can actually be burnt, right? If you understand Hedron, then you'll know that there is a way for tokens to actually be burnt, right? And this is kind of combining those two together. So if you purchase some of these tokens and you stake them in their protocol, then you get to earn the inflation in the system. If somebody's just holding these tokens or they are not staked, they don't get anything, right? So if you have a 100% token supply and 10% of those are staked, then the inflation inflates the entire 100% supply by 4.236% annually, right? So that goes up, and then that amount of inflation, if there's 10% of the supply that is staked, gets squished and all pushed into that 10%. So the amount that is received by those 10% who have staked is in excess of 4.236%. Yeah, 4.236%. Now, another thing that's different here or interesting is that there's two different ways of staking here. They call it a simple versus advanced for staking. And just like, say, Hex, where there's a bigger pays better bonus and a longer pays better bonus, if you take this token and you stake it for 5 days into the future, or 500 days into the future, or 4,000 days into the future, then you receive a larger bonus. Up to, I think the bonus goes out to about 3,100 days, if I remember correctly. So the longer pays better bonus is also substantially larger than the bigger pays bonus. So if you were to compare and you're going out for a longer period of time and I have a larger bag, but go a shorter period of time, you're going to receive more of a bonus than I would for less of that time. And at the max. The max for the bigger pays bonus is 16.2%, and the max for the longer pays better is 3,173 days at 2.08x. Right, so you can get a 2x on your tokens by going over 3,100 days, basically 3,200 days, which is a little bit less than 9 years, I think. Right, so going out 9 years, you get a double. Not terribly bad, right, for legacy standards to have a double in 9 years. Crypto standards, that's a lot, but that doesn't include inflation. So you have a simple way to stake, and then you have, they call it an advanced way of staking. And they differ in terms of returns, but also penalties as well. So the simple way of staking, let's talk about the returns first, and then talk about the penalty portion of this. Now, with the simple, so you have 4.236% of the total supply of this token increases per year, right? Of that supply, it is squished into, assuming, right, it could be 69% of the total supply is staked, right? We don't know until it actually launches, which should be later in the fall. Also, disclaimer, I don't own any of this, and I did not sacrifice for this at all. But still very interesting. This is the type of protocol that I like, right? Something that is, there's no admin keys, there's an audit coming up on it, there's a fixed supply of it, well thought out. It's based on another very well thought out project here, right? So you have, and there's no coins going to the developers, but there's ways around that potentially with the sacrifice. So I don't know exactly, but this is what they put in the paper here. So these are the types of things that you would like, right? Something where there's no admin keys, there's an audit taking place, there's well thought out in terms of the structure of it, and you have more decentralization and no third parties that are going to be involved in it, right? You can't just go in there and change the code or things like that. Now, that doesn't mean couldn't do something else, right? Somebody's going to control this through almost 1/3 of a trillion tokens, right? Somebody's going to control that. It's probably going to be closer to 1/4 of a trillion by the way that they're getting distributed, but probably like around 1/4 of a trillion tokens. Somebody's going to control a large portion of those, and they're basically controlling what's going on, but that's no different than, say, something like Hex. Now, let's get back into the simple versus advanced. When you get that inflation, 23.6% of that inflation goes to the simple stakers. So if the number of stakers was split between 50% of the stakers were advanced and 50% of the stakers were simple stakers, 50% of, or the rewards, 23.6% would go to that 50% who staked it simple. So they get a lower return, basically. They also there's no penalties on the principal if they do a early end stake. But it's not as simple as that. There's a scale of blackout period, which basically says that, and I don't fully understand the scale portion of it, but the first 10% of a stake and the last 10% of a stake, there cannot be an early end stake. The position has to be sold off, right? So that's kind of like this, right, where you can sell off your Hedron stake as an NFT, but the payout is completely different than it would be if you sold off an NFT through Hedron. So if you're doing a simple stake, you get a smaller amount of the rewards, but you don't get a penalty on your principal, just on the rewards that you would get in a position. Also, that blackout period, right? So the first 10% or the last 10% of a stake, that can go up to around 40% or 60 something percent total. So that means 38% of somebody stakes for 100 days. That first 38 days, they can't sell. They can't end stake. They would have to sell, basically, is a more appropriate way of saying that. And the last 38 days, they can't end stake. They have to sell. So that's, 70% of the time they would have to sell and not actually end stake. And it has to do with the state of the system, I believe. So if there's a lot more people that are doing end stakes, then that percentage ticks up over time to make it like more costly to do an end stake. So it shortens that window. It makes it smaller and smaller for people to be able to actually do an early end stake. Now, the advanced staking is interesting, right? So they can have penalties on their principal, which that's in contrast to the simple, which doesn't. And they can only stake for 90 to 4,444 days. So you can't do a stake for less than 3 months, which is interesting. They get penalties in the system. They get a portion of the liquidations in the system, and they get a portion of the bleed out, or the period of time after a stake ends. If it has not been claimed, a portion of it goes to the advanced pool. So first of all, they get a larger portion of the inflation. They get 76.4% of the inflation in the system if it's in advance. They also get a portion of the penalties in the system. This could come from the simple stakers or from other people in the advanced class of stakers that causes a penalty. This can also come for liquidations, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. When somebody sells their position, that's what they're referring to as a liquidation. So if I have a position and I auction that off, like you can do with Hedron, right? There's a portion of that goes to these advanced stakers. The bleed out. Right? Somebody does a stake for 30 days, and during that 30-day time, they lose their seed phrase, or they die, or something happens, and they do not access that. Well, there's a 7-day grace period after the end of the stake. After that 7-day end stake, what ends up happening is they start to lose value in there. So if you're a simple staker, the amount of time it takes to drain that is about 1.25 years. So it takes 430 something days roughly, or 430. Yeah, I think around 430 days for a stake to go from where it's at to zero, because there's a small percentage per day that is taken out of there, right? In an advance, right? So this is the advanced staking. A larger portion of that is taken out per day, and only takes about 9 months for it to go from wherever it's at down to zero. So that's kind of interesting. The period of time is smaller, right? And there's no good accounting function here that can be run. So that's kind of interesting. This is the chart here of the longer pays better here. And this is the maximum amount of time that somebody can stake something for 4,444 days, right? That's the bonus there. And this is 3,173 days is the maximum of the payout for the longer pays better. In order to get the maximum, which I forgot to mention this, the maximum bonus for bigger pays better, meaning the larger amount of money you put into the system, the more of an impact they're going to incentivize you for, is 161 million Jenny tokens. Okay, now we've highlighted the differences between these two staking. One stake, they both have the auctionability of them at any point in the system's life. There is that period of time where it's locked up, right? So that's an interesting way of doing that. Not only that lockup is at the end of a stake, but it's also at the beginning of a stake. It's interesting. So what happens if somebody does want to sell their stake, right? Shit happens. They broke their leg and they need money, or whatever the case is. Well, the maximum amount that they are going to receive is 30%. Basically, like, it's going to be less than 30%, but it's going to be, the max they could receive is about 30%. And how this works is, if you had $100 stake and you were going to auction this off, similar to how something like Hedron works, it goes out for auction at 8%. So say if it's $100, the first bid has to be at least $8. And what happens with that? Well, that $8 goes to a burning of Jenny tokens. So then the next bid, then it starts a timer for 24 hours. So the auction's only good for 24 hours. But if there's something happening in the last couple of minutes, an order comes in or a bid comes in, it extends it an additional 5 minutes. So this could be carried on for a while, right? Now, some bid comes in at $12. So what happens? That first bid is released, and the second bid, $8 would be burnt, and $4 would be the remainder. So say, for example, that $100 stake goes up for auction. Right? The person's like, "Hey, I need money." Right? Well, they're not going to get much money, but this is how it would work. 8% of that goes to burning the token. Cool, like deflationary in some aspect, right? Or reducing the growth rate of the inflation, right? Cool. Of the remainder, so 8% gets burnt out of $100. Say if it's sold for $100, then $92 would be left over. The amount that this person would get is, the max is 30% of that. It's like slightly over 30%, right? It's 30% of the fraction. So they're going to get about $27. So they're not going to get 30% of the total. They're going to get 30% of the remainder after the 8%. So the math works out to be different, right? Because if you're getting 30% of $100, you're getting $30. So you're not getting $30, right? You're going to take $100 minus the 8%, and then you're going to multiply that times 30%. So you're going to 27% of the total, right, amount. Then there's still excess, right? Because you've taken 27.6 plus 8, so there's $35.60, but the total was $100. So what happens to the remainder of this, which is $64.40? Well, of this, 66% is burnt, 25% is going to the advanced stakers, and 8.82% goes to the creators of this, right? The founder, the OA address. Also, let's see here. This is also mentioned in here. The OA address gets 14.5% of penalties and excess bids on auctions. So that's what it actually said in here, but then it says something else in a different spot. So let's actually verify this right now. Okay, so 14.5% is what I wrote down. Okay, here we go. The maximum and additional tokenomics. At the maximum, an additional 14.5% of the initial supply, or 35 billion, can be minted from the holders of the legacy. Okay, that's not the appropriate one. Where is the next one? Okay, the origin address. The Genius Smart Financial Contract will specify what is known as the origin address that receives a proportion of penalties and tokens from the minting from legacy Jenny, right? So this address is going to receive a portion of the penalties, and they're going to get a percentage of whatever is minted. So if there is 250 billion or a quarter of a trillion of these tokens minted, then no more than 14.5% of the penalties and excess bids for transfer auctions are sent to the OA. The OA does not receive any Genius tokens at launch, although it doesn't sound like that in the first sentence, right? Will specify what is known as the origin address. That receives a portion of penalties and tokens from the minting of legacy. All right, so it says here you're getting tokens at the minting of the legacy Jenny. So I think it sounds like they're contradicting themselves. The origin does not receive any Genius tokens at launch. Well, they're getting the minting from this, right? So it doesn't seem super accurate to me. Could be not understanding this. Another interesting thing here is this portion here. They are able to actually transfer the OA, right? So this is talking about the OA address and the wrench attack, right? Here is how the OA can be proactive to protect themselves. The OA can change the OA address itself at any time. The OA can change the account that has the ability to change the OA address. So basically they can change where the money is going to from how this contract is set up, which is different or interesting. You know, this portion here I'd like a little bit more clarity on, but one portion which I did find kind of interesting was what they called future proofing, right? So if you go to the very last page here and they talk about the future proofing of this token, and they go to say that this smart contract is kind of like you're able to kind of port it over to another network. So it's going to launch on Ethereum, and then it plans to go to Pulse Chain when Pulse Chain launches. And there's a portion of the contract that allows this to actually take place. I thought that was kind of interesting, because if there's a lot of people who think this is a very well designed protocol, right? Well, if this is well designed, right? I've said this in other videos. If Hex is well designed, which I believe it is, then there's going to be some version of this type of contract on every single chain. And this sounds like it could be facilitating that. So it makes it easier to have this type of thing on multiple different contracts. Now, the biggest thing here is adoption, right? Which one is going to drive adoption? Because it's cool to earn trustless yield too, but if there's no adoption, then that's not going to actually help the price. Trustless yield is great and fantastic, right? And you can just get paid to wait, which is dope. That's what you do in real estate. You know, you can get cash flow every single month, but you're getting cash flow you can use. In this protocol and this protocol, you don't have cash flow you can use every single month, but you'd have to take a look at adoption and where you think adoption is. I like this token. I think this is super interesting. Will I put any money into it? I don't know at this point, but it's also not out. It doesn't plan on being out for several more months. So I will keep you posted if I do this, but I do like these things where it's decentralized. They're open, or at least appear to be open about a lot of the things. This white paper, I just did a video yesterday on white papers. You can check that out, clicking on the icon and the searching for white papers. There's so many garbage white papers out there. So they did a good job on this white paper. If you guys want to help the channel out, take a second to share this video out, spread the news of the channel here, trying to bring new stuff to the market and help everybody out in the process when we highlight things that are put together in an intelligent, thoughtful way here. So I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to check out the other YouTube channels. Should be a link up here. Instagram, a lot of fitness related content, and Twitter if you like a lot more crypto stuff. Appreciate you. Peace.